Hey, welcome back to part 2 of the video series, Learn How to Stage. So we're going to talk about the skills of staging today. So I've got a little board here. Hopefully you can see it. It's going to be mirror image and backwards. But I am going to talk about the things that are most important to you as a stager, the skills that you need, and probably a lot of it intuitively you already have. So I'm going to build on that a little bit. Now, what I do want to tell you is I teach this program and it takes me 12 weeks. So we're going to do this in like 3 short little videos. So we'll see how this goes. But we're going to start with this. All right. So first of all, when you think about the skills of staging, for most of us, we probably already have that inherent thing in us to understand balance, to love color, to really get excited by design, which kind of goes along with the whole, get to go shopping, get to fill a house, love decorating, love anything to do with houses. So it kind of goes in sequence with that. So the things that are really important though when you're staging, and this is really quite a significant piece, and I have this at the bottom, I don't know if you can see it, but the seller versus the client. And often when we are thinking about decorating, we are working for somebody who's hiring us to decorate, and we're decorating based on their taste, what they want to show in their house, what's really important to them. When we are talking about staging, we're actually not really so concerned about what the seller wants as much as the buyer wants. So we're actually being hired by the seller to actually do the work that is going to attract the right buyer, and the buyer that's going to spend the right amount of money and more money than we're actually listing the house for. So our job in this is to really help our seller make a lot of money. So that's why we're really, although we're being paid by often the seller, sometimes the agent, depends on where you are and what kind of arrangement they have, but you're typically being paid by the seller or hired by the seller, but you're actually doing the work to engage a buyer. And that's a big, big difference, because when you're working for a design client, you're really thinking about what colors they love, what furniture they love. You're buying for them. It also means that you have quite a long relationship with those clients, which are really good, very fruitful. But when you're thinking about staging, it's actually quite a short turnaround time. It's kind of an in and out. It's actually one of the things that's most attractive about staging over decorating or design, because we don't have to get caught up in what the design client really wants, because we're worrying about the buyer, not the seller. So that's one big, big significant difference. It's also why we're able to go and create a design plan, and I don't have to get approval from my client to implement that. I just need them to agree that I'm the expert and they can pay me to do it. So that's part of the job, is then to create a design plan. Now, one of the things that we are always thinking about in a space, and this is really important when we are staging, is the idea of flow. Now, flow is good when you're, and very important when you're designing a space to live in, but when you're creating a space to sell, I'm not so concerned about how much room the chairs have to pull out and what space there is between the sofa and the coffee table so that someone can sit down or things like that. What I'm worried about, what I'm most concerned about, is that when a buyer comes in to see the property, they see this big, beautiful space and they can get to the parts they need to see in order to want to buy. And that's not going to be sitting on the sofa. So that's what flow is. And that is really a very critical part of the staging process. It's something that I think from experience, if you haven't taken some training, if you don't know the difference, that's going to trip you up. And what happens is that it actually trips up your seller in their opportunity to sell their house. And that's not a good thing. So that's why it's really important to know some of these key things. The other one that's really important is scale, because we need to make sure that whatever furniture is in that space, it does 2 things. It tells the buyer exactly how that room is going to be used, so the function of the space, and it's also going to make the space look big. So if we had a condo, for example, and we were staging a condo, we would look at smaller scale furniture or less big scale furniture, preferably not big, but smaller scale furniture, so that we can show the great space in the condo and how to use that best space, that a dining room table will fit in this space if it's the right size. The buyer doesn't have to know that it has to be the right size. They just need to know that, oh, a dining room table can fit here. And that's our job, is to make also a space feel like it's livable. And so it appeals to the kind of buyer that we want to be able to sell the property to, the one buyer who's going to spend the money that this seller wants to get out of the sale of their house. So that's about scale. Then we get into What else? Texture. Well, let's leave texture for a minute because that kind of wraps up into a bunch of other things. Color is very important. So when we look about color, oftentimes you'll know that when you look at a staged home, it's often neutral. Neutral means that the sofas are usually a basic color. There's not a lot of pattern on them. And that's because we're not decorating for our client, our design client. We're decorating for a buyer to come in and go, this is what this space is used for. This sofa will fit in here. If this sofa fits in here, so will mine. And what I want my buyers to do is to walk in and go, hey, I've got to live in this space and I know that my furniture will fit in here. This is exactly what I need. Here's a living room, here's an office, and it fits a desk, and here's a bedroom, and it's got a nice big bed. My bed's that big, I can fit my bed in there. So that's what we're trying to do for a buyer, is we're trying to get them to identify with living in the house and in the property, and the house is telling a story. What we've put in is telling a story to that buyer. So that's kind of when you're looking at scale and color. And part of what happens with color is we want to really look at neutral, because neutral needs to be sort of the backdrop. So when we talk about painting walls so they're neutral, it's not because we want to be boring. It's because we want buyers to be interested in the space because they see a nice, clean, bright space, not because they remember it because, oh, remember that house with the red wall? We don't want them to remember the house because of the red wall. We want them to remember the house because that beautiful space that I know I want to have, I must have. And of course, the other thing with paint too is we know that it's pretty much money in a can. That if you are selling a house and you have freshly painted, it looks fresh, it looks well taken care of, it's a neutral backdrop. And one really important thing is that a buyer is not going to come and look at your house and go, hey, I'm going to have to spend money on painting this house because these are not my colors. I could not live here. Now, that's a problem because buyers typically don't want to have to do work, and they will pay more money for a finished house where they don't have to do work. That is really, really important. I also think it's really important because buyers' time is really important to them. So if they're thinking about moving to a house and they're looking at a property, but they work out of town, which is often, or in town, and you're selling a house that's sort of a little, 45 minutes to an hour commute into town, the last thing a buyer wants to do is think about having to come back, spend more money on renovating or updating their house, and more of their time, which is really precious. So we know that buyers, first of all, don't want to spend more money on, or less, even if they get it for less money, they don't want it. They don't want to have to spend more money if they don't have to. The other thing that's really important to always remember about a buyer coming into a property, and this is why staging is so really critical, and especially critical when we're looking at vacant stages, and which is really something that's become very popular in the last few years. Vacant staging is critical because a buyer needs to be able to come in and see exactly what this space would look like if their things were in it. They need to be able to identify exactly with this space and know that they can live in here and this is what it's going to be like when they live here. There is a lot of buyers who cannot visualize themselves living in a space. They cannot visualize how much furniture space takes up. So if they walk into a vacant room, and in fact, vacant rooms tend to look smaller rather than bigger. When they have furniture in them, they actually look bigger, interestingly enough. So we want to make sure that the furniture that's in the space tells the buyer exactly what they're going to use. And the really important, well, there's that plus, is the fact that when you have your photos taken of a property, if it's staged, then buyers can look at MLS against all their competition, all the listings against all their competition, and say, I want to live in that house because that's got a living room and that's got an extra office and that's got a great big bedroom. If they look at a blank space on the listing and it's just a photo of an empty room, they have no idea. No idea what the space is for, no idea how big the big space is. So those are the critical reasons why we do what we do, because we have to help our seller get that money and get that right buyer. And we practically have to spoon feed the buyer so that they know exactly what the space is going to be like when they're finished. So those are really critical. Color balance is part of that whole flow, part of the scale. Finding that you have the right furniture, ensuring that the furniture that you put into the space absolutely represents the function. That's why often you'll hear stories about where, well, they made me put the office back to a bedroom. That's why, because if a buyer comes in and they don't see 4 bedrooms, they see 3 bedrooms and an office, they'll only remember 3 bedrooms and an office. We need them to remember 4 bedrooms. So that's really critical. So those are the sort of skills that you need that come from your decorating, are often something that, as I said, is inherent in you. It's a natural ability for you. That's why you love homes. That's why you love what you do. And these are the skills that you'll need. And plus, adding to that, if you think about the consultation, it's also the skill of customer service, of being a really good communicator, about being able to talk to your clients about what needs to get done in their house, being able to sell them on the value of that as well. So even though we get all these decorating skills, we still have to really be able to talk well to our clients about what we need them to do and what we're going to do for them. That's very, very important. So we've talked about the basic skills of staging, what you need in the consultation, and also the difference between a seller versus a client and why that's really important to us. And the last thing I'm just going to mention that you can click on and register for a free training that I'm going to be giving, where I'm going to talk about all the things we talked about today in part 2 video, and also in the part 3 video as well that we're going to talk about. So I'm going to go over those in more detail. I'm going to give you some real strategies that you can use to apply so that you actually can start to feel confident and actually be able to sell yourself as a stager. So that's very exciting. The other thing that I have to say that I'm also going to talk about is about training, because training is really, really important, and it's obviously important to me because I train stagers, but it is a really critical piece of your success as a stager. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is because your competition is also being certified and taking training as well, so you want to be as competitive with them as possible. And the other reason, which is a really big one, is that you want to be able to deliver to your clients the best service possible. And the more education that you have, the more value you bring to them, the better off your clients will be and the more successful you'll be in your business. So I'm going to talk more about that also when we get into the free training, but I just wanted to touch on that because it is really something that's very important as we go forward. All right, have a lovely day, and I will see you for part 3.